Dark Veil here. Let's get right into the next tale. The first time my son saw her, I told him it was a dream. The second time, he asked me why she was standing in Grandpa's room. The third time, he stopped telling me about it. I kept telling myself there was no single moment where I could have stopped it. That's what I tell myself when I wake up at 3 in the morning and lie there staring at the ceiling. It's a comfortable thought. I've gotten very good at comfortable thoughts. The truth is, there were probably a dozen moments, but the one that stays with me is my dad sitting in the passenger seat on the drive home from the hospital, asking me about the one that was in the box. His voice was careful, deliberate, the voice he used when he was really needing me to understand something. I patted his hand and said, "Don't worry about the box, Dad." He looked out the window and didn't say anything else. That was the last genuinely normal conversation we had, and I spent it telling my father not to worry. Bringing Reg home was the right thing to do. I want to be clear about that, because the rest of what I'm going to tell you about might make it sound like a mistake. It wasn't. After the stroke, he couldn't manage the house in Whitmore on his own, and my sister lived abroad, so the math was simple. We converted the downstairs study into a bedroom, bought a proper bed, borrowed a commode from a neighbor who'd recently become a widow, and that was that. My wife, Donna, barely blinked. She just started reorganizing the pantry to make room for his medications. That's the kind of woman she is. I need to remember that. Our son Idris was 14 and deeply unbothered by most things, which at the time I found reassuring. He carried Reg's bags in without being asked, showed him how the TV remote worked, and then went back upstairs to whatever 14-year-old boys do in their rooms for 6 hours at a stretch. No drama. A good kid. Reg arrived with almost nothing: a bin bag of clothes, a framed photograph of my mother, and one cardboard box sealed with brown tape that he carried himself all the way from the car down the front path and into the guest room, refusing every offer of help. He was a month out of hospital and still unsteady on his feet, and I hovered behind him the whole way with my arms out like I was trying to catch a large, irritable bird. "What's in it?" I asked. "Just something I'll keep for her," he said. I assumed he meant my mother. She'd been gone 11 years. I didn't push. The first few weeks were actually fine, better than fine. Some days Reg was sharp in the mornings and liked watching the news, which gave us something to talk about over breakfast in a way we hadn't in years. He'd always been a quiet man, my father, not cold, just economical, more comfortable with silences than most people. He started talking more after the stroke, which the consultant said sometimes happened. Inhibitions loosen. He told me things about his childhood I'd never heard. Small, funny things, embarrassing things. One morning he told me he'd once reversed his car into a statue outside Whitmore Town Hall and just drove off. He laughed until he coughed. It was the best morning I'd had in a long time. Then he started mentioning Nora. It started casually. He'd reference her like you'd reference someone everyone already knew. "Nora was in the chair last night," he'd say, watching the door. Then he'd ask if we had any marmalade. I'd ask who Nora was, and he'd look at me like the question didn't make any sense. The consultant said it was common. Stroke patients sometimes experience vivid hallucinations, particularly at night. Familiar figures, deceased relatives, nothing to be alarmed about. I asked Donna what she thought. "He seems happy when he talks about her," she said, "so let's not make it into a thing." Good advice. I took it. The box got opened on a Thursday, about 10 days in. I walked past the guest room and saw the door slightly ajar and Reg asleep in his chair by the window. The box was open on the floor. I should have left it. I know that now. I absolutely should have left it. The things inside were mostly what I expected. A few pieces of jewelry that had been my mother's, a child's drawing, mine probably, ancient and completely unidentifiable, some letters tied with kitchen string, and at the bottom, wrapped partially in a piece of old curtain fabric, a puppet. A hand puppet. Old. The fabric was faded burgundy, the face painted on rather than sewn, with a fixed expression that wasn't quite a smile and wasn't quite not one. The eyes were glass, small and dark, except the left eye, which was slightly larger and a pale amber color, like it had been replaced at some point with whatever was available. I had the distinct feeling it wasn't meant to be looked at directly, like I'd interrupted something mid-thought. I wrapped it back up, put it at the bottom of the box. That night, Idris knocked on our bedroom door and asked if someone had come over. He'd heard Grandpa talking to someone. I told him it was probably the television. He didn't look convinced, but he went back to bed. The warnings, when they came, did not sound like warnings. That's the thing nobody tells you. Warnings from people you love don't arrive with dramatic music. They arrive over breakfast. They arrive in the middle of a conversation about something else. Reg grabbed my wrist one morning whilst I was putting his medication on the nightstand and said very quietly that the puppet had belonged to a woman his mother knew, a woman everyone called Nora. He said this woman believed that certain objects could become occupied, that she'd given the puppet to my mother because she was frightened to keep it herself, and my mother had accepted it because she didn't want to seem rude, which was very like my mother. He said she kept it sealed in that box for 30 years and never once looked at it. He said she made him promise never to bring it into a house where there were children. I was already running late for work. I told him I'd look into it. I kissed him on the forehead and I went to work. On the drive in, I thought about calling the consultant to ask about paranoid ideation in stroke patients. Then I got caught up in emails and forgot. Donna started changing so gradually that I couldn't tell you exactly when it started. She began sleeping badly. She'd always been a good sleeper, the kind of person who's unconscious before her head hits the pillow, and I'd been quietly jealous of it for 15 years. Now she was up at odd hours, sometimes sitting downstairs in the kitchen with the lights off. When I'd find her and ask if she was all right, she'd say yes, absolutely, and believe it completely. And in the morning, she wouldn't remember being there at all. She started saying things about Idris that didn't sound like her. Not terrible things, just slightly off things. A coldness around the edges. One evening, she told me she sometimes found him irritating, the way he just existed around the house without contributing, and I stared at her because she had never spoken about him in that way, not once in 14 years. She caught my expression and immediately said she didn't mean it, and seemed genuinely confused about why she'd even said it. The consultant, when I mentioned it at Reg's next appointment, said stress does strange things. A crowded house, a new caregiver dynamic, disrupted routines. Had I considered whether Donna might benefit from talking to someone? I hadn't. I added it to the list of things I was going to do. Here is something I've never said out loud to anyone. About 4 weeks in, I was washing up late at night, and I heard what I thought was the radio coming from the guest room. A low voice, a pause, then a second voice answering. One was my father's, the other was trying to be. I stood very still at the kitchen sink with my hands in the water until it went cold. Then I dried my hands, turned off the kitchen light, and went to bed. I've thought about that decision more than any other. The night I finally sat down with Reg properly, the first real conversation we'd had since the drive home from hospital, he was having a clear day, one of his best, alert and present and slightly impatient with me in the way he'd always been when he thought I was being slow. He told me the full story. Nora had been a quiet woman, not the theatrical kind. She didn't own crystal balls or burn incense or make performance of anything. She just believed, with a calm and practical certainty, that some objects accumulate residency, that things without anywhere else to go will settle into an object if it lets them in. She said the puppet was already occupied when she gave it to my mother. Had been for years. She said my mother was the kind of person who wouldn't turn something away, even something that she didn't fully understand, because turning things away wasn't in her nature. He said she kept it sealed, and it kept its end of whatever arrangement that was. Then he looked at me for a long moment. He said it fed on proximity, on the particular heat that builds between people who love each other but can't quite reach each other. Unresolved things, arguments left half-finished, old wounds neither person has the right words for yet. He said it didn't manufacture any of that. It just found it, moved toward it, the way damp finds one wall in a house you haven't checked in a while. My house, he said, right now is very warm. The fight between me and Donna happened 4 days later, over a parents' evening I'd forgotten to attend. It started at that. It became something much older and larger, the kind of argument that arrives already knowing exactly where to press. Things were said with a surgical precision that surprised me, specific things. True things, technically, but shaped in ways I wouldn't have known how to shape them, like someone had been paying closer attention to us than we had to ourselves. Halfway through, Donna said something about my relationship with my father, about the years of distance before the stroke, about the fact that I'd moved him in partly out of guilt and partly because it made me feel like the kind of son I'd always meant to be. It was accurate in a way that made my stomach drop, because I hadn't told her that. I'd barely admitted it to myself. She apologized for it afterward, said she didn't know where it came from. I believed her. Idris didn't come down for dinner that night. Reg stayed in his room with the door closed. The house felt very loud even after we'd both stopped talking. The next morning, I found the puppet on the kitchen table. I had not put it there. I asked Donna. She hadn't touched it either. I went upstairs and showed Idris a photo on my phone and asked if he knew how it got there. "She moved it," he said. "Oh, the one with the different eyes." A pause. "She doesn't like staying in one place." "Where does she go?" I asked. He shrugged. "Wherever people are talking." He said it the way you'd describe something you'd seen so many times it had become unremarkable, the way you'd tell someone the bus stops at the end of the road. I drove the puppet to a charity shop in Stratham, about 20 minutes away. I wrapped it in the curtain fabric, put it in the box, put the box in the boot of the car, and didn't tell anyone where I was going. Donna thought I was getting petrol. The woman at the counter had a long silver braid and reading glasses on a chain. She accepted the box without looking inside it, without asking what was in it, and placed it behind the counter. Then she smiled at me and said quietly, "We'll put her somewhere nice." I was 3 steps toward the door before it caught up with me. She said, "Her, not it, her." I turned around. She was already moving toward the back of the shop, the box under her arm, not looking at me. I stood there for a moment with my hand on the door frame, and then I left, because I don't know what I would have said. That evening was the calmest the house had been in weeks. Reg slept through dinner. Donna made pasta and we ate it at the table like a family, and Idris told a long, rambling story about something that had happened at school involving a substitute teacher and a projection screen that didn't make complete sense, but made us all laugh anyway. Even Donna laughed, really laughed, the way she used to, the way that still gets me every time. After dinner, I sat in the garden with a cup of tea, and I thought that maybe the worst of it was over, that we'd gotten through something without fully understanding what it was, which is honestly how most things work. You just get through them. Donna came to find me around 9. She stood in the garden doorway with her arms crossed against the cold. "Can I ask you something weird?" she said. I said yes. "Have you noticed anything different about the guest room?" I hadn't been in the guest room since the morning. I said no. "I don't know, it's probably nothing." She paused. "It just feels like something's still in there." I told her she was imagining things. I believed it when I said it. She went inside. I finished my tea and went to bed. I did not check the guest room. The relief lasted about 12 hours. Then Donna came to find me in the garden the following evening and said she'd been thinking about something she'd never quite said out loud before. I told her not to. I don't know why I said it so quickly or why my voice came out the way it did. She looked at me. I knew somehow exactly how the sentence was going to end, the specific shape of it, the particular place it would press. I'd heard it before, or something very close to it, just in a different voice. And the worst part was, it wasn't wrong. Thanks for listening. I could really use a like, comment, or subscription to help boost my small channel. And if you're really enjoying my tales, if you buy me a coffee at the link below, it would be appreciated so much. Until the next Dark Veil tale, have a frightfully fun day.